I thought for a player that's had a very, very good season, that was one of his poorer games for me yesterday. I didn't appreciate the performance from Jones as much as I have other games this season.
Yeah, I think that's actually fair, and obviously he scores an important goal, and and he's not terrible, but he has performed better, and I think I don't think the midfield as a whole was absolutely sensational, actually, in terms of I thought McAllister absolutely grafted and obviously ends the game with 2 assists, but I thought Jones and Gravenberch both kind of didn't quite look like themselves yesterday. Gravenberch, I've got this little concern in the back of my mind about him being overplayed, and I'm a little bit worried about that. I have to say, and he looked leggy in a way that he hasn't very often looked like that this season. So that's one to kind of keep an eye on, because this will be his busiest season ever. And with Jones, no reason for him to kind of not be quite there. He's been in really good form recently. He hasn't played as much this season as a Gravenberch. So, you just hope it's kind of a one-off, and maybe both players just were a little bit out of sorts for whatever reason, and they can get back to it. But yeah, I think that was an area where Liverpool could have been slightly better yesterday.
So we'll move on to speak about the midfielder situation as a whole in a couple of moments, because there are some things I'd like to say there. And you touched on Curtis Jones. What I love about the midfield and the situation Arna has now is it's almost like he has not two identical players, but he's got Jones and Szoboszlai, and he can pretty much put them in and out, put one in, put one out, and the levels don't drop. And I love that about the midfield this season. I'll move on to speak about Maka in a second. And Elliot, you could nearly say you can do some Alexis McAllister type things, but Ryan Gravenberch is that one that I think we will all have a concern about. On Maka, though, a couple of assists yesterday. I mean, that'll do no harm. It's always great to see the midfielders chipping in with a few bits like that. And I thought he was probably our best midfielder yesterday, if I'm being honest. But I do totally agree with you that it wasn't a midfield performance overall that I'll look back on as one of our best of the season.
Yeah, I liked what I liked about McAllister was the combativeness, really, and that was kind of necessary, because Leicester were quite physical in there. They did, quite impressive, really, in certain aspects of the game. I thought Winks did really well for them, and it kind of gave them a little bit of a foothold at times. And but I thought, what you needed in that situation was someone like McAllister to say, okay, well, I will go into the physical battle with you. And I think he's 16 duels he's involved in, so it just shows how kind of busy he was getting about the pitch and getting involved in tackles or dribbles and competing basically in that midfield area. So that really helped Liverpool out. But I think, we're talking about the midfield performance not being perfect, and yet Liverpool dominate the game from start to finish. So maybe we've just got ridiculously high standards. But I've seen the midfield perform better this season. I'm sure maybe it's just the conditions of the game and how things played out. I'm sure they'll be back to the best in the next couple of games.
So I wanted to kind of move back to a conversation around midfield, but tie it in towards the January transfer market. So I was reading a piece in The Athletic the other day, and the narrative in the piece was something along the lines of Liverpool may or may not look to be active in the January window with regards to a midfielder. And I have to say, it astounded me, David, because you mentioned Ryan Gravenberch a moment ago, and my big fear is that we turn the situation that Arsenal have with Saka into a Ryan Gravenberch situation with us. And it's not that I don't feel we have a good enough midfield or that fans don't think Ryan Gravenberch is amazing, but we know we're one injury or one bit of fatigue and a drop of form away from maybe giving a chink of light or a chasing pack to come and close down Liverpool in this title race. So surely we've got to try to be proactive in the January market and look to find that midfielder to protect Ryan more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I couldn't rule out that Liverpool would do that. I think left back's not an area that we will see movement on because they've got two there. Whether obviously Liverpool probably need someone there at some point, but I think they can get by. I have no qualms about that, and I understand that being the approach. But I would not rule out a midfield signing at all. I think the one thing we can say, it's not going to be a short term option. They will not go out there and sign one just to say we've got another midfielder to give Gravenberch a rest, because if they need that, it should be Endo. And for me, he probably should be getting the odd start here and there just to protect Gravenberch. Where Liverpool should be doing the business is if someone is available who they think will move the dial in the way that Zubimendi would. Someone who really is that kind of high level and someone the manager trusts a bit more. So I guess it's one of those really. It's whether that player is available and they think they can get it. I want to see that done if they can. And if not, then I would just like to see a little bit more of Endo then, if that's going to be the case, and they don't think the right player's out there, because I don't want them to go and sign the wrong player. I think we'd all agree with that, and don't make a rushed bad decision just to get someone in. But if they feel that that's the case and they really don't think that midfielder is out there, or they want to wait for Zubimendi till the summer, again, I'm happy with that. If they think he's absolutely right, then they have to use Endo more. We really have to see that, because I am a little bit concerned about that. Not even necessarily an injury, because maybe he'll get lucky, but just fatigue and just looking at that performance yesterday, just a little bit of worry there about that. And but if you need to protect him more, the option to do that is already there in Endo. And then if you can get something done that really is a long-term signing in that position, then again, they should do that. But yeah, those are the options there. And I just think continuing to do what you do, which is kind of running him into the ground a little bit, that shouldn't be considered an option, because he's already way on track for his biggest season in terms of minutes played. And, you don't know what kind of effect that's going to have on him and whether he can reach that bar. Maybe he can, and maybe they know better than us on that. But I'm a little bit worried about that, I'd say that much.
So there's 2 points around this midfielder search that I think I'd like to throw into the mix here. The first one is that the word opportunistic frightens a lot of Liverpool fans, because it kind of can be interpreted from the sense of, well, we're not doing anything, but we're going to just look and observe. And if something pops up that's cheap or seems like a good fit, we'll move. It kind of makes some people feel like maybe there isn't a scouting system there that has a list of 4, 5, 6 players on it, which would be the case. I've no doubt about that. The club would absolutely, when I mean opportunistic, to me, I think it feels like if one of the players that Arna wants happens to be available, and maybe we didn't think the selling club were going to be there, then we'll go ahead and do it. So that's one aspect of it. But the not bringing in a midfielder scares me as well, because, we've got PTSD from title races where we have fallen away in the latter part of the season, whether it be through exhaustion, a lack of form, or whatever. And we don't want to roll that dice again, because this feels like a great opportunity for Arna in his first season to come in, win a big one, and straight away then, we're talking about him as the guy, the real, heir to Jurgen Klopp's throne. So they're my 2 concerns, David. And I guess, can you understand when you see the word opportunistic around, maybe that's open to interpretation a bit from fans?
Yeah, but I think your interpretation of it is absolutely spot on. In that, if Zubimendi tells Real Sociedad in January that he wants to go, that would be an opportunistic signing, and yet it's a signing that Liverpool would absolutely love to make in any circumstances, and a player they really like. So it doesn't rule out the possibility of signing someone who is absolutely top class, or the fact that they're kind of sitting around clicking their heels and not really looking into these things. I think, I'm convinced that if the right midfielder became available, and they will have a list of who those could be, they will absolutely do it. I don't think they want to hang around in that, because they wanted to do it in the summer. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. But in terms of, as you say, with the possibility of injuries and the kind of tightrope that may be walking there, I agree that it's a concern. I think the one thing I would, kind of caution against being overly worried about maybe a late season collapse, because I think last season's collapse had a lot to do with the fact that Liverpool they had 5 or 6 injured every single week for the entire season. Basically, they did, it was just, that's one of the worst injury crises I've ever seen. And one thing that you hope will be better this season, and generally has been, is that Liverpool's injuries haven't been too bad. And so that fatigue shouldn't be quite the level it was when the collapse happened last season. So, we're hopeful that will be better. And that was one of the reasons that this manager and his team were brought in, is because that element was better. So I'm hopeful that will avoid the collapse. But I totally agree. And, as I say, for me, the solution is, if you can't get the right one in January, don't do it. Just wait, but use Endo a little bit more to protect Gravenberch, because I'm very much worried about him as a kind of young player who's playing more football than he ever has, really. Maybe bringing Endo in, maybe you do drop the odd points here and there, because Endo isn't Ryan Gravenberch, but I think your lead is so significant. And if that keeps Ryan Gravenberch fit until the very end of the season, and he's fresh coming into the Champions League final, maybe, that's the perfect scenario. So they really do have to look after him for me.
Is Nico Gonzalez a name that you've seen come up at all, or heard in your conversations? There was an article during the week that suggested, I think it was Anfield Watch, said Liverpool are very impressed on scouting Nico Gonzalez.
Can't say that's anything I've heard about, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't. It's not a name I've heard, so we'll see on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think all of us can say here outside of Zubamendi, it doesn't seem like there was any real concrete name that we could stand over. So I guess it's just people trying to maybe guess at this point, having a little look around.